female apostles and no disciples. Following on and appearing to add more weight to our thesis that Paul's church was in some ways fundamentally different to the canonical Gospels, we find a number of interesting references regarding women and the term apostle in the epistles. We read in Philippians 2:25, "But I think it is necessary to send back to you Epaphroditus, my brother, co-worker, and fellow soldier, who is also your messenger, who you sent to take care of my needs." Here, crucially and intrinsic to the theological gulf between Paul's epistles and the Gospels, the word messenger literally translates as apostle in the Greek. In this case, Epaphroditus, who Paul calls apostle, is one such messenger. But many newer Bibles have altered the wording. One can only speculate as to why. It does, however, show, and we shall give more examples of this, that to Paul, apostles simply meant anyone who had been through the experience of seeing Jesus in Revelation themselves. He is very specific on this, and to Paul, an apostle himself is not one of the 12, nor one of the 12 apostles we get from the New Testament. More interestingly, he actually cites women as apostles too, a very Gnostic proposition. In Romans 16, right from the get-go, we feel the appreciation Paul has for women. Romans 16:1-4. "I commend to you our sister Phoebe, a servant of the church in Cenchrea. Welcome her in the Lord in a manner worthy of the saints, and assist her with anything she may need from you. For she has been a great help to many people, including me. Greet Priscilla and Aquila, my co-workers in Jesus Christ. They risked their lives for me. Not only I, but all the churches of the Gentiles are grateful to them." Phoebe appears in glowing terms in the above passage. Welcome her or receive her, depending on the English we translate to, could indicate she was even the bearer of the epistle to the Romans, which is the largest of the epistles and one with perhaps the most theological importance. She therefore could have been in a position of considerable trust as far as Paul was concerned. We also have reference to another important female within his church, Priscilla, who he calls in straightforward egalitarian terms co-workers in Jesus Christ. Regarding Phoebe in the book Man and Woman, One in Christ, we read, "Every meaning of every word in the New Testament related to the word Paul has chosen to describe Phoebe as a leader that could apply in Romans 16:2 refers to leadership. This includes the usage shortly before in Romans 12:8, the one in leadership. Let him govern diligently." It is then highly significant that Paul's wording here relating to Phoebe should be as it is. Could it really be that Paul's relationship towards women could be so at odds with later church doctrine? We then read Romans 16:5-7, "Greet my beloved Ephantius, who is the first fruits of Achaia to Christ. Greet Mary, who labored much for us. Greet Andronicus and Junia, my countrymen and my fellow prisoners, who are of note among the apostles, who also were in Christ before me." Junia was indeed a woman. Paul seems to have starkly different ideas as to what apostles are as far as the New Testament and subsequent doctrine goes. Paul's apostles seem to be anyone, Jew and Gentile alike, who have undergone the transformation of the inward revelatory experience and noting Junia as noted, esteemed, or outstanding among the apostles, depending on the translation, would further tend to support the thesis that women played a key role in his church. It is worthy of elucidation in establishing Junia's clout in the early church that even Chrysostom, someone not friendly to women in much of his work, stated, "Even to be an apostle is great, but also to be prominent among them. Consider how wonderful a song of honor that is." For they were prominent because of their works, because of their successes. Glory be, how great this wisdom of this woman, that she was even deemed worthy of the apostle's title. Further in Romans we read, Romans 16:12-15, greet Tryphaena and greet Tryphosa, who have labored in the Lord. Greet the beloved Persis, who labors much for the Lord. Greet Rufus, chosen in the Lord, and his mother and mine. Greet Asintricus, Phegon, Hermas, Patrobas, Hermes, and the brethren who are with them. Greet Philologus and Julia, Nereus and his sister, and Olympus and all the saints who are with them. Here in Romans 16:12, Paul is referring to two women, Rufus's mother and Olympus. He mentions more in the very same passage quoted previously, and he even calls at least one of them an apostle, who is of note among the apostles. We see he names women in the previous line, so we can safely assume he is naming these women are among the apostles he is talking about. And then likens the same people to saints. Praise indeed. It is also clear from Paul these women were performing rituals only reserved for men by the time the literalists had sunk their claws into the ecumenical landscape and become part of the dominant church hierarchy. This is a very different language to what the Gospels say, referring only to the apostles being the 12 we know of today. We encounter Judea and Syntyche, also women who hold a special place in Paul's heart. Philippians 4:2-3. I plead with Judea and I plead with Syntyche to be of the same mind in the Lord. Yes, and I ask you, my true companion, help these women, since they have contended at my side in the cause of the gospel, along with Clement and the rest of my co-workers, whose names are in the book of life. Here again, it is strongly indicated that with putting these women in the same context and linking them with Clement and the rest of my co-workers, the language being as it is showing Paul makes no distinction between women and the men within his ecumenical order. In fact, of high relevance to his argument and picked up by Payne in his extensive study on the issue of women in the early church, we read, the titles that Paul gives to the women he mentions imply leadership positions. Deacon, Romans 16:1, leader, Romans 16:2, my fellow worker in Christ Jesus, Romans 16:3 and Philippians 4:3, and apostle, Romans 16:7. Furthermore, Paul describes them as fulfilling functions associated with church leadership. They worked hard in the Lord, Romans 16:6-12, and contended at my side in the cause of the gospel, Philippians 4:3. Over 2/3 of the colleagues whom Paul praises for their church ministry in Romans 16:1-16, 7 of the 10 are women. His partner Luke adds that women prophesied, Acts 21:9, and Priscilla explained the way of God more accurately, Acts 18:26. It is noteworthy indeed that subsequent Christian teachings sought to downplay the role of women in the church, while Paul, one of arguably the first Christians and someone to whom the Christian faith owes so much, would seemingly hold women in such high regard. It is not surprising, however, if we note that Paul was reputed to be one of the first members of a Gnostic Christian sect. In Galatians, we see more happy female-friendly prose. Galatians 3:28. There is neither Jew or Greek, there is neither bond nor free, there is neither male nor female, for ye are all one in Christ Jesus. Corinthians states this, 1 Corinthians 11:11-12. Nevertheless, in the Lord, woman is not independent of man, nor is man independent of woman. For as woman came from man, so also man is born of woman, but everything comes from God. We therefore witness within the epistles multiple women: Priscilla, Euodia, Syntyche, Junia, Mary, Tryphena, Tryphosa, Persis, and others finding prominence in Paul's church, treated as equals as far as the texts tell us. He does, however, make prescription for women to cover their heads. 1 Corinthians 11:5. But every woman who prays or prophesies with her head uncovered dishonors her head. It is the same as having her head shaved. But he also states outright that they may prophesy freely within his church. We hear the same in Corinthians 14:31. For you can all prophesy in turn, so that everyone may be instructed and encouraged. Junia is indisputably called an apostle upon the straightforward reading of Paul, and he praises many more for their hard work in the church. We witness other examples of Paul actually belittling women and relegating them from any and all apostolic work. But it is argued that these are later misogynistic interpolations, contrary statements, and that appear as additions which remain unfortunately present in his letters to this day. 1 Corinthians, while stating women can prophesy a few lines before, quoted above, also has this to say. 1 Corinthians 14:33-35. As in all the congregations of the Lord's people, women should remain silent in the churches. They are not allowed to speak, but must be in submission, as the law says. If they want to inquire about something, they should ask their husbands at home, for it is disgraceful for a woman to speak in the church. Such examples of contradiction, it would reasonably seem, are likely the result of taking later license with a newer doctrine not of Paul's nascent church. From up to 16 female inner sanctum members of Paul's church, as attested by honest Catholics today, to the lines directly above. It is unfortunate that a more bigoted and backward church appeared to have won the day.